Today's topic is exploring percent. Now the word percent means per hundred. And the symbol we use is as follows. Here is your percent sign. Now keep in mind that percent means per hundred. And let's say we want to change each of the following fractions to a percent. 35 over 100. Since it's already written over 100, we can just write that as 35%. If the fraction already has 100 in the denominator, we can just put the numerator down as our answer and attach a percent sign. So 212 over 100 gives you 212%. 47 over 100 gives you 47%. Now to change a percent to a decimal, move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So if I have 45%, on the number 45, the decimal falls at the end of the number after the 5. And if we move it 2 places to the left, so now it's in front of the 4, we end up with, we'll put a 0 in front of our decimal point, we end up with 0.45. Now, the thing that's important is you need to drop a percent sign. So now, if we want to change 5.9% to a decimal, take 5.9 and move your decimal point 2 places back. If you have an empty space, put a 0 in its spot. So we end up with 0.059. With 67.25%, we move our decimal point 2 places back. So we end up with 0.6725. Let's move on to the next page. To change a decimal to a percent, move the decimal point 2 places to the right and attach the percent sign. So you're doing just the opposite. So if I have 0.6 and I move the decimal point 2 places to the right, I've got an empty space now. So I'm going to say 60 or 60 and attach the percent sign. If I have 0.025, move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and I end up with 2.5 and put the percent sign on. With 1.75, move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and it now falls at the very end of the number, so you actually don't have to write it down if it falls at the end. And now just put your percent sign onto the number so you have 175%. Moving on. Writing percents as fractions. Now, if you want to write a percent as a fraction in lowest terms, what you're going to do is write the number over a denominator of 100 and then simplify, or in other words, reduce your answer. So if we have 35%, that means we're going to write 35 over 100. Now let's reduce this. Think of a number, preferably the biggest one, that will divide into both 35 and 100, and that would be 5. If we divide each number by 5, 35 divided by 5 gives us 7, and 100 divided by 5 gives us 20. So we have 7/20. Moving on, we have 0.2%. So we want to write that as 0.2 over 100. Now the thing is, we don't want to have a decimal in a fraction. So what we're going to do is let's take and we're going to move our decimal point we're going to move our decimal point until we get to the very end of the number. Now, if we just move it one place to the right, we would end up with a whole number of 2. So let's move it one place to the right, and we attach the same number of zeros as we do places we've moved our decimal. So what we're going to do, since we've moved the decimal point one place, we're going to attach 1 0. So in other words, we're going to have 2 over 1,000. So I'm actually going to erase that one here. So we have 2 over 1,000. Now we've got 2 whole numbers in our fraction, so let's go ahead and reduce it. We can divide the numerator and the denominator by 2. So we end up with 1 over 500. Let's try this again. We have 0.85%. So we're going to start off with 0.85 over 100. Now, how many decimal places do we have to move this decimal to get to the end of the number? It's 2 places. So we're going to write 85, since we moved that decimal. And we're going to write down 100. But since you've moved the decimal 2 places, you're going to add 2 zeros. So really, you've got 85 over 10,000. Now we want to reduce this. So we can divide the numerator and the denominator by 5. 85 divided by 5 gives us 17. And 10,000 divided by 5 gives us 2,000. So we end up with 17 over 2,000. Let's move on to our last page. In the next set of directions, we want to write each fraction as a percent. And how we do this is we basically start by taking the numerator of our fraction and dividing it by the denominator. And just to remind you, the numerator is the top number, and the denominator is the bottom number. So we're going to start by saying 3 divided by 5, and that gives us 0.6. Now remember, we want to write our answer as a percent. So that means we're going to have to change that decimal to a percent and move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So let's do that. We'll move the decimal point 2 places to the right. We've got an empty spot, so we'll have to put in a 0. We'll have 60, and then attach your percent sign. So you have 60%. Now next, we have 5/8. We want to change it to a percent, so you take the numerator of 5 and divide it by 8, and you get 0.625. Remember, you want to change that to a percent, so you move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and we end up with 62.5%. Next, we have 1/12. Take the numerator of 1 and divide it by the denominator of 12. And we get 0.0833333. It seems to just go on and on forever. Okay. Now, we can actually write that with a bar over the 3, and we're going to do that in just a minute because that 3 just keeps going on and on. So remember, we want to change this to a percent, so we have to move our decimal point 2 places to the right, So we end up with 8 point, with all of these 3's that go on and on and on. Well, remember, we said that anything that repeated itself, we could just put a bar over the top. So we can actually write that as 8.3 with a bar over the top of the 3%. And I should have put a percent up here. So we get 8.3 with a bar over the 3%. That is it for today. Thank you very much for joining me.